Hello, welcome to Genealogy Coffee Break. My name is JD Arden, and I'm here today with my colleague librarians in the chat and my guest today, Sofija Grandakovska. Sofija teaches at CUNY John Jay College of Criminal Justice, teaching culture and crime, using and drawing on her knowledge of comparative literature and comparative genocide studies. Sofija has written and lectured extensively about the Holocaust and Sephardic diaspora and Jewish history in the Balkans, in Yugoslavia, in Israel, and in the Republic of North Macedonia, among other subjects. So, hi, Sofija, nice to see you today.
Nice to see you too, JD, and thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. So you grew up several decades after World War II in Yugoslavia, and then in the country of Macedonia, in the capital city, Skopje. What remnants or awareness of the Jewish minority history was there in Macedonia?
You're right, I'm a child of Yugoslavia, and after that, a teenager of Yugoslavia until 1991, when Macedonia declared its independence as the Republic of Macedonia. And it was a very interesting time because when Yugoslavia existed as an entity constituted of 6 republics and 2 provinces, it was really interesting time, and it related to interesting ideology. So here I would like to share one experience. I remember those days of Yugoslavia that we had to become Tito pioneers, Titovi pioneri. And at the beginning of autumn, at the day of Republic, it was 29th of November, we had to give an oath of allegiance, and we received a red scarf that we have put on our, that there was ceremony, and we put red scarf, and we received also a blue navy hat with a red star, and also we received a pioneer booklet, which actually it was a pioneer booklet, but it can be compared with the older generations that had a communist booklet. At that ceremony, we had to say some words that presented an oath of allegiance, and let's say, danes koga станувам пионер, давам честен Титов пионерски збор. I found the translation of this, and I would like to read it to you, and I think that it is going to be very interesting. Today, as I become a pioneer, I give my pioneer's word of honor that I shall study and work diligently, respect parents and my seniors, and be a loyal and honest comrade, that I shall love our homeland, the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, that I shall spread brotherhood and unity, and the principles for which Comrade Tito fought, and that I shall value all peoples of the world who respect freedom and peace. Why did I say this to you? This chapter from my life, from my childhood, actually related to your question. I want to say that in Yugoslavia, in that period, the ideology nourished the idea of brotherhood and unity of all peoples and nationalities in Yugoslavia. When I say this, I would like to emphasize that the knowledge within the educational system, there was a lack about the Jews, especially about the period of the Holocaust. I did not know anything about Holocaust during my primary school education and secondary school education. I gained that knowledge from my family. And the first reception for me as a child was through the aesthetics of film during the Yugoslavian time. I still remember the screening, the equalization of the Diary of Anna Frank. On the other hand, in Macedonia, after the liberation in November 1944, the first constitutional meeting of the Jewish community of Macedonia occurred at the end of December 1944, and it was actually a meeting about the reconstitution of the Jewish community that existed before the Second World War. But what does it mean that only 190 people returned back, and those were people who returned from, who managed to escape somehow the Holocaust, because we know that 98% of the Macedonian Jewish community from the Vardar part of Macedonia was deported to Treblinka by the Bulgarians with the help of the Germans, and they were annihilated in Treblinka to extermination camp. So it was very hard to reconstitute the Macedonian Jewish community after the Second World War. However, the remaining Jews started to take activities about the opening the synagogue, helping to the Jews who came back, and hopefully to organize the Jewish life. That is about the institutional level during after the Second World War within Yugoslavia, when Macedonia was part of it. On the other hand, on the academic level, that space is empty. It's zero. The first academic studies or research appeared in the 60s, and the book was about the Holocaust and Macedonian Jews related to the Second World War, and even before that, was published by academic Alexander Matkovsky. And the second instrumental academic study was published in 80s. So there is big time discrepancy between the first and the second publication. And in 2011, I published my book that I edited, and I'm one of the authors about the Holocaust and Macedonian Jews. So you can see that on educational level, there was lack about the awareness of the Jewish presence, since we did not study it. It was not part of our school program. On institutional level, it was about reconstitution of the Jewish community, and on academic level, there was here and there something, but it was, but we cannot speak about the continuum in researching of the Holocaust or Jewish community that lived on this geographical part called Macedonia, or Social Federative Republic of Macedonia, or so on and so on.
Right, interesting. So to rekindle that interest and talk about some awareness of Jewish community there, when we talk about the diaspora of Jews from Israel to medieval Spain, and then the expulsion from Spain, there can be a lot more diversity in context even compared to Ashkenazi diaspora. So Jews in the Sephardic diaspora could have been surrounded by Arabic speakers, Persian speakers, Turkish speakers, other languages of Europe, hidden in Latin America or other contexts. So what was the unique and special description and history of Jews who ended up in the Ottoman Empire and specifically Macedonia?
Yeah, very interesting question. And there is a very interesting line of investigation that I followed, not only about the Jews who came from the Iberian Peninsula on the Balkan Peninsula after the expulsion, but there is a very interesting line about the Jewish history from the ancient times related to the synagogue in Stobi, that is today on the territory of North Macedonia. So ancient times, when I say it is from the 1st to the 5th centuries AD, there was synagogue 1, and after that it was erected synagogue 2 that existed until the 5th century AD, when the basilica was built above the synagogue 2. So, but from the remains, from the archaeological remains, we can still detect and vivisect some important information about this ancient Jewish community on the territory of Macedonia, that existed until the formal end of Byzantine Empire, and that they had really active sacral life through the synagogal life, and probably when the basilica was erected under the synagogue, they started to go and to migrate to other parts near where they were able probably to maintain their Jewish life. After that, with the formal end of the Byzantine Empire, which comes with the fall of Constantinople in 1453, there is a new chapter for the Jewish community on the territory in Macedonia with the Ottoman Empire. So we know that Sultan Bayezid II maintained the tolerant confessional politics. So after the expulsion in 1492 from Christian Spain, Jews started to move in 3 directions. The first direction that they moved to escape, to save their life, was that they migrated to Portugal, but we know that few years later they had to migrate from Portugal in 3 ways, in 3 lines: Portugal, France, England, and Holland. And the third line was Northern Africa, Middle East, and to the European part of the Ottoman Empire, and that is on the Balkan Peninsula, where around 13,000 Jews settled in then called monastery, Skopje, Štip, Kratovo, and other smaller parts of then Ottoman Macedonia. Because within this short, brief history of the Jews on the territory, geographical part of Macedonia, we can follow 3 lines that come from the same matrix. The first one, in the ancient time, there were Romaniotes, the so-called Byzantine Jews who spoke Greek. After that came the Ashkenazim, to escape the Crusades from different reasons. We know the history. And the third line are the Sephardim who came in Macedonia after the expulsion. So Macedonia became a new Sephardic zone, and I would call it the process of Sephardization, because the Sephardim became majority, and the other two groups, Romaniots and Ashkenazim, actually were consumed by the Sephardim, by the Sephardic culture, by the Sephardic rituals, Ladino language, and so on and so on. So for me, this is one of the specificities of the newly formed Sephardic zone in Ottoman Macedonia through the process of Sephardization.
You mentioned the town of Bitola, which many people may know of also by the name of the town in the Ottoman period, that of Monastir, where you have personally ancestors who lived there in Macedonia. What was the Jewish community like there?
Well, Jewish community of Monastir is known as one of the most traditional and conservative Jewish community on the Balkans, because through their traditionalism, they showed resistance to the waves of modernization. And they lived in the so-called Jewish ghetto, and it represented like a microcosmos within the Ottoman millet system. They had partial freedom, but they were very successful, let's say, in trading, in processing metals. They included, let's say, new technology in processing canvas, pottery. They had very intense and vivid cultural, social, religious life, and so on and so on. So these are going to be, let's say, the most general aspects how the Jewish community in Monastir during the Ottoman Empire looked like. As far as my ancestors, they belonged to the Jewish community that was registered by the Ottomans. The archival documents that they succeeded to find come from 1844-45, and there were several from these documents. We can see that there were few Jewish neighbors, and my ancestors belonged to the neighborhood Big Yard, a new synagogue. So I found about my ancestors who belonged to the line of Cholak Shlomo, who was son of Samuel or Shmuel, and the other that was the maternal part, and the paternal part is Grando Yaakov, son of Moses. So these documents, they're very rare documents, and I spent years and years and years to reconstitute what I have already known. So these documents for me have anthropological value, because when you don't have more documents, more material traces, I treat these documents from the Ottoman archives as a bonds. for anthropological research and investigation in future. So it's very interesting also because I applied also a linguistic research on this. So let's say in that period of time, we know the Jews did not have surnames. So Cholak is Ottoman word, and this surname was given to my ancestors by the Ottomans who did the census. The paternal side, Grando, the word grand comes from the French word, but it has its variants. So Grando would be Italian variant. The Spanish idiom would be grande. Actually refers to the preservation of the origin from Spain as honor and dignity.
That's a really wonderful connection. Where did you look? Where did you start to look? How can other researchers who have ancestors in the Balkans start to look for those kinds of documents?
At the beginning, I knew only few things about my personal history. And you know that I come from a geographical territory where there were many warriors, many armies, and each of those armies would have brought their corpuses, their administration, their documentation. When they would have left, they would have taken their administration, and so on and so on. So also, you know, because of the many wars, many occupational systems during the historical past of this small geographical part of Macedonia, and many, let's say, fires that happened, many I faced personally in my research, I faced with a lack of documentation. I did not know from where to start and how to continue. So I started to work very diligently on this, and I consulted many historical resources that were, let's say, not primary, but secondary. And from the secondary resources, I managed to come to these resources from the Ottoman period. And after that, to start to build the other part of my research on the most recent period, Second World War, during the two Balkan Wars. So different archives. And also in Macedonia, in Israel, in Belgrade, in America, Jewish Genealogy, Center for Jewish History, and the 4 archives that exist in the Center of Jewish History. Also, I used some epigraphic. I had to read some texts that I found, let's say that were written in Hebrew or in other languages. Also, I found very important information about from the Second World War. There were pieces of information how actually the paternal side of my ancestors had to change their surname and to take with false documents, of course, and to take a Slavic surname in order to survive. And also I found a very interesting document that my grandfather sent to a Yugoslavian commission that he wants to return back his old surname, which was Grandokov, because as he states in that document, it is a name of my ancestors. It is a multi-leveled investigation, and I think that I'm still not finished with that yet. And also rich oral history that I heard from my grandparents, from my parents, from our relatives. So I tried to unite both the documents and the oral history.
It sounds like not a simple process, but a rewarding process and a multi-layered, multi-location work that researchers like you have to go through. Since we're here in New York, what did you learn about monastery Jews who immigrated to New York?
Yeah, this is another topic of my researches because when I was researching about the Jewish community of Macedonian Jews during the Holocaust, and I faced with the tragic fact that only less than 200 Jews remained alive after the Holocaust. I knew about the information that many Jews from Ottoman Macedonia, especially during the two Balkan Wars, 1912 and 1913, managed to escape to New York, to Rochester and Indianapolis. I started to think, because they're only, let's say, remaining Jews. And on the other hand, I discovered that they did not even know that their fellows and their relatives are not alive anymore after the Holocaust. And my interest started from that point, just to compare what happens now with the remaining Jews who even left Ottoman Macedonia years and years before the Holocaust. And also, I was very much interested to know about that gap between leaving the very conservative and traditional Jewish community in Ottoman Macedonia and going to the West, to America, where the process of modernization was growing and growing. So I discovered that actually I was very much actually interested also to know why they left Macedonia at the turn of the century. In 1908, the young Turkish revolution actually motivated some political changes that reflected on the Jewish life in Ottoman Macedonia. And in that period, actually, Ottoman Empire became a parliamentary monarchy, and the new constitutional government introduced new decrees with which the political activities of a group are not allowed, and also the religious and cultural diversity was unsustainable. Also, the Jews from monastery were very poor. There were some diseases, there were fires. The religious intolerance started to grow and to grow and to grow. So around 2000 monasteries managed to come to America in two waves until 1924, where the new constitution by the American, where there was limitation,
right,
regarding the immigrants and the possibilities of migration. But for me, this research was very precious because I managed to discover the names of these people, and I found original documents from the congregation of the Sephardim from monastery, Ahavat Shalom, which was formed in 1907. And this congregation actually consisted until 1970. And I found their names from the fees that they paid to the synagogue. And they're handwritten.
Wow.
And when you find those documents, for me, it is such a blessing, as if you're there. You know, they're not typed, they're handwritten. And also, I used few other fonts to investigate, like immigration lists of naturalization, and I managed to find, let's say, um, the holder of the householder, that is the male, and his who was his wife and his children who immigrated in these three cities in America.
That's amazing. And a lot of that information you also found through Ancestry, correct? The database Ancestry.
Yes, Ancestry, Sephardic Association,
Mhm.
YIVO also, and all the four centers from the Center of Jewish History.
So the information is there and it's accessible.
It is. Just the researchers have to go deeper, to dig deeper, like archaeology.
So talking about the human history, where are the descendants of those Macedonian Jews today around New York?
Yeah, it is a very interesting question, and I tried to research a little bit about it, but I came to understanding that today we cannot speak about the compact Jewish community of monasteries, because within years they mixed with Ashkenazim and other Jewish uh, other lines from the Jewish matrix, you know. So the congregation of monasteries does not exist anymore. It existed until 1970, and so on and so on. But I was lucky to meet in person one of the descendants of the monasteries, who came actually that his grandfather came at the turn of the century, and the name of this gentleman is David Cohen. He lives in New York, and he's actually Don David Calderon Aroesti. Calderon
Wow.
and Aroesti were actually the families who lived in Ottoman Macedonia, and after that, also during the in the list, deportation list, also you can find members of this family.
Mm.
And I met David Cohen, who is around 80 years old now.
Wow.
And now he wrote a book of poetry. It's not a classical poetry, but it is a poetical reflection on the monasteries and Ottoman Macedonia. And his book is the title is Remembrances. It is going to be published very soon. And in his book, he asks himself, who am I? And in his book, actually, he still nourishes that mythical memories for Macedonia and for monastery. I would like to read you a couple of verses from his poem, Mythical Memories. Mythical memories. My father had mythical memories of monastery, Macedonia, the place where he had lived before living in America. He didn't actually remember. He couldn't actually remember. He came here when he was 7 years old. But two older brothers came to America 8 years later, and in the absence of a better tutor, he became their first English teacher and New York directions monitor, in exchange for which they reminded him, refreshed his recollection of the old country, what it was like in monastery. I know this only because I, his only son, no more than 9 myself, asked, what was it like in monastery? So in New York, there is no more monasterily congregation of monasteries, but through poetical truth, through remembrances, still the monasteries are alive.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for bringing an artistic side to this historical and genealogical study. That has been fascinating to hear.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
You too. It was a pleasure.
Bye bye.
Bye.